Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melisa Liberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to episode 226 of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. This is Melisa Liberman, and today I want to remind you that it is time to evaluate your first half of the year and think forward to the second half of the year, revisit, revise, reimagine, and get yourself into the spot where you're able to finish the year strong. So if you're listening to this in the real time, or it's July or August, even September, this is a great episode to be thinking about the structure that you can leverage to make sure that you're designing a powerful second half for your consulting business. So today I'm going to walk you through that framework to design your own powerful second half of your consulting business for this year. This is not meant to be just another planning session. You might be thinking right now, yeah, I know I need to do that. I have a way of doing it. Today, I want to reinforce for you that there are elements that I often see consultants overlooking or my own consulting clients overlooking. And I want to help you to get to the place where you're not overlooking those really important things so that you're able to build out a plan for the second half of the year that doesn't result in you under earning or under achieving, and ultimately, that you're being utilized in the best way possible and that your business is moving on the trajectory that you want it to be moving on. So this is a special time in the year to recalibrate as a business owner who's in control of your revenue, of your time, and your growth trajectory. And even if you don't feel like you're in control of all of those things, this is the method to get you there. So this is the path and the 5 steps to help you get to the place where you have a really solid plan for the second half of this year. So what we're going to do on today's episode is focus in on the 5 steps to plan the most powerful second half of the year for yourself. And I'll walk you through each of those steps and give you example of how this could look for you and your business from a real life example so that you can use that as inspiration for the way you want to be applying it to your own business. And then I'll give you a tool or a question for each of the steps, a couple of questions for each of the steps. So you can truly put this into action without it being overly complicated. Before we dive in, though, I want to encourage you, if you haven't yet done so, go download my book, The Grow Your Consulting Business 14-Step Roadmap to Make Your Independent Consulting Goals a Reality. You can download it on my website at melisabook.com, or just go to melisaliberman.com/book. And on there, you can download the PDF. If you don't have the hard copy, you might want to grab the hard copy too on Amazon. I always love having something that I can highlight. But go download the book and then look at chapters 4 and 5 that focus in on establishing your vision and setting up an assessment system for your business. This is something that book will be really helpful in augmenting today's episode. And the other thing that comes with it when you download the book is a toolkit. So there are exercises and worksheets and step-by-step to work through the book that goes along with it. So that toolkit will also help you to put today's episode into action. I was talking to someone earlier today, actually, and she was telling me, I love this podcast so much, but there are so many times where I listen and then I don't actually do anything with it. So today I'm really encouraging you to make sure that you're taking some time to put what I'm sharing with you today into action, because it's going to make a really big difference for you, whether you achieve your goals this year or not, or whether you even exceed your goals or not. This is the framework that helps you to get into that spot. Okay, so now let's talk about, we're going to walk through each of the 5 steps. I'm going to give you an example. And then, as I mentioned, a tool that will allow you to implement each of the steps in an effective, needle moving way. Okay, so step one. Step one is assessing your first half, what happened in the first half, assessing with precision. And I think that is really important. We're not just assessing, oh, how did it feel? Generally speaking, how did I do? Am I on target with revenue? Am I not? How is my pipeline looking? All of those questions, if we're not answering them with precision and we're answering them based on our best guess, most of the time we're wrong. Most of the time, we don't give ourselves credit for what we actually have. And therefore, you're starting off this 5 step process from a really shaky position where it's not accurate. So take step one, which is assess with precision. I'll give you a tool that you can leverage here in a moment to do that. But before I do, I just wanted to give you an example, kind of going back to this idea of guessing. I was working with a consultant who is my coaching client, and we were talking about what she wants the second half of the year to look like. She described that to me. And then I asked her, what does she think based on the first half of the year is going to need to change? And her initial inclination was, I need more leads. And so then I started really digging into that to figure out, is that true? Is it not true? Well, where could her intuition be off? And as we started getting first the data, what does your pipeline look like? She answered that, and we were able to articulate it. This is what the pipeline looks like. Where did those leads come from primarily in the first half of the year? She was able to answer that question. As we started assessing with precision, what she ended up realizing is that her issue isn't that she needed more leads. She actually had a fairly healthy pipeline. What she realized instead, after assessing with precision, is that she needed to increase the quality and quantity of inbound leads. Very different. It's not about just driving more leads. And for her, a lot of that had been done through networking and attending events. She realized that that is a very strong foundation for her business. But in looking back in hindsight, what she wasn't getting as much of were inbound leads. And she knows that inbound leads can improve her close rate and enable higher pricing. And so that's what the assessing with precision, step one, is an example of what it can help you to accomplish, like it did for her. So I'll give you a tool that you can leverage, very simple. Of course, you can leverage the book for sure, chapter 5, and the toolkit that goes with it. But if you want to do it in a very simple way, I'll just share with you. Let's put together a systems evaluation matrix for yourself. And the 5 systems you want to be looking at, no matter what, and then you may add a couple more, are lead generation, utilization, pricing, sales, and delivery. And you want to, number one, get the data. So the matrix here, we've got these 5 rows, let's say, and then the first column is the data for each one of those. We're not guessing. You definitely won't give yourself enough credit, so do not guess. Go get the data. And if you don't have the data, then that can be a really good indicator of something you want to put in place for your business in the coming second half of the year. And then ask yourself, when you look at each of those systems and the data, what moved the needle in the first half of the year? And then what's not working? This gives you an incredibly valuable baseline and learnings against which then you can start making some plans for the second half of the year. So that's step one, assess with precision. Step two, reimagine. So often we get into this place where we just are headed down a path. We want to achieve a certain goal, or maybe you're at a place where, ultimately you want to build a $3 million business. And that's just what's been in your mind, in the back of your mind for a while now. Or maybe your goal for this particular year is 500K. And so you're really focusing heads down, working toward that plan. I was working with a consultant who had that goal. She was on a 500K path for the year, heads down, working toward it, not really coming up for air, and really, committed to it, which is incredibly important. But at the same time, she started feeling dissatisfied. And at this second, at this point of evaluating, now that we're in the second half of the year, it's such a valuable time to take a step back and say, okay, I'm just not feeling the way I thought I would be feeling. For her, she said, I thought I would be feeling motivated and inspired right now, but instead I'm feeling frustrated and dissatisfied. And I can't really put my finger on it, is what she was saying. And she told me it felt like a hamster wheel, a lot of I have tos to get to this 500K. And so what we started to realize is that for her in this step two for reimagine, it wasn't about throwing away the goal, the 500K goal, but the way she was going about tackling it. She would have hit the goal at the end of the year, but she wouldn't have been happy hitting the way she was hitting the goal or feeling fulfilled, and it definitely didn't feel sustainable. And so she used this second half milestone to take a step back and say, and reimagine. That's step two here. Reimagine, how can I hit this goal in a way that does feel more sustainable and fulfilling? And in her example, she decided to shift what she was offering so that it was much heavier weighted toward advisory type work and lower weighted toward project based work. So it didn't feel like such a hamster wheel. And it felt new and exciting doing more advisory type work and figuring out how to sell that work and how to sell it at the price point that she wanted to on a retainer basis. And it felt then invigorating again because it wasn't kind of repeating what she had become accustomed to. And so for you, when you think about reimagining your business, this doesn't mean start over with your goals, unless you feel strongly drawn to that. What it does mean, though, is just taking a step back based on that at first step, your assessment, and figuring out where is it that you really want to go? What's working for you and what's not working for you? And how can you continue forward on the goals that you've set, but potentially reach them in a different way? Maybe you want to revisit for yourself. Maybe you've been solo for a really long time and you've constantly decided, I don't want team members. I don't want to hire anyone. Maybe it's time to reassess that. Listen, this is called Grow Your Independent Consulting Business. So I'm not trying to force you into anything for sure. I love being solo myself with contractors who support me, behind the scenes. But anything is fair game at this point. You're your own employer of choice, as we talk about on this podcast. So reimagine, what does it mean for you to be your own employer of choice? Questions that can help you advance this step number two. If you weren't tied to your current clients or constraints or capacity or business model, what would you build? Take a step back, use a blank piece of paper, make an agreement with yourself that no matter what comes out of that question and answering that question, you don't have to follow through with any of it. But just ask yourself an answer and be honest with yourself so that then you can start thinking about what might it look like to get closer to that ideal vision that you just laid out. And the second question you can leverage is, if anything is possible for you in your business, if anything was possible, what would you want for your business and yourself? Again, make an agreement with yourself. You don't have to do anything with what the answers are to these questions, so that it then becomes easier to answer them and unlock the ability to think about and reimagine your business in a slightly different way or in a wildly different way. But that's step two. Step one was assessing with precision so you know where you're at from a baseline perspective. And now step two is taking off those guardrails and thinking about what is it that you would want if anything was possible. All right. So the next step here is step number three, which is setting your goals. Hopefully, you already have goals. So this should really be resetting your goals, revisiting your goals based on those first two steps. What did you assess and how did you see the baseline with precision? And then step two was your ability to reimagine, revision, look at the bigger picture and think about where is it that you want to head. And so now with step three, you want to take those two inputs and then reset your goals. I'll give you an example. I was working with a consultant and she was at the place where we went through those first two steps and she realized that she wasn't fully on track with her revenue goal. If she kept doing everything she was already doing, she could hit the revenue goal, but it would really be a stretch. So most logical people at this point would say, well, let's just double down on the goal and refine your processes so that you can hit the goal. In this case, though, what we decided to do in working together is for her to actually increase her revenue goal. That sounds counterintuitive, right? For her, where she's wasn't on track with her goal in the first place for this first half of the year, definitely doesn't sound logical to then increase the goal for the second half of the year. But I want to tell you what this ends up unlocking. What this ends up unlocking is a revisiting of the business model itself. So, looking at capacity and looking at what you're selling. In this case, she was selling that mix of advisory and more execution, and she wanted to shift that. So it was more advisory and less execution versus more execution and less. I'm getting these mixed up. I think you know what I'm saying here. For the second half of the year, her goal, she increased the revenue, which really stretched her mind to think about not just incremental kind of small shifts to get her to the place where she could hit her revenue goal, but larger shifts to say, you know what, I want to hit a bigger revenue goal, even though I'm not on track. And I'm going to revise my way of doing business to get there. That's what really helps to move the needle. And I'm not saying to you that you should take this approach or not, but it gives a really good example of for the second half of the year. So often we think we need to stay the course and we need to just optimize and improve so that we can set ourselves up to hit, the goal for the rest of the year. And what I'm saying to you here is you don't have to do that. You can revisit it like she did. Anything is on the table. And for her, she increased her revenue goal, which again wasn't necessarily logical, but it helped her to see that she could sell more advisory, hit the goal, and have more personal time, have more time to work on the business, and even just thinking time incorporated into her week. And so for her, her goal sounded like a restatement, which was I will make 50K per month for each of the next 6 months, taking every Friday off and enabling 5 weeks of vacation, which then created a different target for her and allowed her to get herself on pace in a different way toward that bigger vision, right? We don't want to just be marching toward a goal that doesn't really align to what we come up with in step two. Okay, so then the questions to start off here for you to put this into action. I'm going to give you 3 questions that you can start off with. Number one, what specific outcomes would reflect what you're wanting to accomplish in step two by the end of the year? What specific outcomes would reflect that outcome by the end of the year? The second question, which 1 to 3 goals would create the biggest shift toward that vision that you just made in step two? And then finally, what patterns or issues from the first half of the year need to change in order for the goals that you're setting here in step three to be achievable? So we'll put these questions in the show notes for you. So you can just click there and copy them. But this is really important to think about. The second half of the year is not just automatically how do I keep moving forward to the goals that I set at the beginning of the year? This is a checkpoint for you to say, you know what? I'm going to increase my goals and break my business model. And by the end of the year, have something that looks so much different, not only revenue wise, but also the way that you're running the business and enabling your personal goals as well. So that's what I want to encourage you with step three when you're resetting your goals for the second half of the year, that anything is on the table for you. Okay. Step number 4 is the plan, of course. We've got to plan out now the goals so that you know how you're going to bring them to life. And the example that I'll give you, breaking down what we were doing with that consultant in the last example, was that she then took what she wanted to create, those 50K months, doing more advisory work and less execution, and was able to break those into quarterly projects. So for Q3, it's focusing on speaking and content, building some thought leadership. Again, remember it's inbound leads. And then for Q4, it's creating an excess demand protocol. We've talked about that in a prior episode. But one of the biggest limiting factors that I see is that we feel worried that we're going to generate too much demand. And so then we end up sabotaging ourselves by trying to create just enough demand for what the goals are that we have. And so for her, she realized that this really implementing the excess demand protocol and getting that operationalized will make so much of a difference in her ability to sustain those 50K months. And then we got to the place of operationalizing her, what I'll call the working on the business slots, taking in a very specific way what's going to happen on. She works on her business on Mondays and Fridays, and all day Monday, half a day Friday. And so we blocked it out. We blocked out exactly what she was going to accomplish in the time spots on Mondays and half a day Friday. So she knew how she would use that time. And it wasn't just sort of time set aside to work on the business, that she didn't actually know how she was going to use it. And then finally, another example of her plan was she built out a plan to, as part of the excess demand protocol, start building a bench pipeline. And so we put that in place with One Page CRM. We'll put the link to that in the show notes as well. I have a quick start guide, but she knows that she needs to start building a bench pipeline, which she's doing now, and then we'll, really double down on it in Q4. And so for you, when you're thinking about your plan, think about what projects do you need to put in place in order to enable reaching your goals? What systems do you need to have in place? What processes? What routines and habits? And then what people do you need to have in place? Doesn't mean you need to hire anyone, but perhaps there are people that you want to engage as support for you and the goals that you're wanting to achieve. Maybe you want to outsource some of this work in order to make it happen for your business. You want to really be thinking about who are those people that will support your plan as well, or a coach for that matter. All right. Whether it's me or another coach, getting that type of support is incredibly invaluable. That's why I have a coach at all times. Okay. Now, finally, step 5. Step 5 is to align your mindset so that you can follow through and create momentum. So, this example, this 50K per month mindset, is incredibly important to know what that means. For her, how will she need to be thinking in a different way that results in 50K months as opposed to 25K months? She's got to double her mindset. She's got to think about these inbound leads and why they're coming to her, why they would be coming to her, why they would be seeking her out, why they would see her as valuable as to compared to other those consulting buyers might be considering. Getting herself into that headspace of the 50K per month business owner is what is going to make the difference between hitting the goal or not hitting the goal, between executing the plan and bringing it to life versus not bringing that plan to life, falling short. And for her, purposefully thinking. So it's not just knowing what is the 50K per month mindset, it's also purposefully thinking like a 50K per month business owner. When a challenge comes across her plate, it's about, how would a 50K business owner think about this? Someone who just generates 50K, it's just the norm. How would they think about this challenge? How would they tackle this challenge? What decision would they make about this? Or proactively, what does a 50K per month business owner, how do they approach a sales process or a speaking engagement or thought leadership? Getting herself into the headspace of that 50K per month business owner is what then ultimately brings that to life. You can have the best laid plan, but at the end of the day, if you're not having the mindset that goes along with the plan, if you're running the plan off of skepticism or hesitation or self doubt, now listen, we all have this, right? But if you're primarily running those plans off of those emotions, you're not going to hit the goal. Whereas if you are running a plan from a mindset that generates confidence and certainty and clarity, that's what brings the plan to life. And so for you, as you're thinking about implementing the mindset side of this 5-step process, ask yourself, how does a fill in the blank per month business owner think about this? For example, how does a 50K per month business owner think about this? Fill in the blank. It doesn't have to be month either, per month. It could be per quarter. How does a 200K per quarter business owner think about this, as an example? Or a second question, a second out of 3 questions that I'm sharing with you. How is a 50K per month business owner spending their business owner time? For you, how is a fill in the blank per month or per quarter business owner spending their business owner time? How does the 50K business owner think about themselves? How do they think about their clients? How do they think about the services they're delivering? How do they think about their competitors? What do they do when they're experiencing self doubt? Getting yourself into the headspace of the consultant who's already brought their goals to life is what will help you to accelerate the results that you're wanting to create in the second half of the year. All right, let's pull this together with the 5 steps to design a powerful second half for your consulting business this year. Number 1, we're going to assess the first half with precision. Number 2, you're going to reimagine your vision. Number 3, you're going to reset your goals. They don't have to be logical. Create some motivation for yourself. Number 4, build a plan. And then number 5, align your mindset around that plan and ultimately the vision and goals. All right. As we wrap up today's episode, I strongly encourage you to plan out your second half of the year. You can do 2 things. Go download the book at melisabook.com, Melisa book.com. Leverage that book, chapters 4 and 5, along with the toolkit that comes with it. And then second, when you download it online, even if you've already purchased the book, go download it online so you can grab that toolkit. And then take the episode questions and tools that I shared with you today and implement that 5-step process so that you've got a really strong, solid, clear plan for the second half of the year. And if you know that you're someone who does best when they have support, which, by the way, I didn't always know that about myself. I always thought that getting help was a sign of weakness, or that I could certainly do all of this on my own. It's what I do for my own, when I was fully consulting, it's what I did for my consulting clients. We have this idea that we should be able to do it for ourselves. It is incredibly challenging to do this type of work for ourselves without support. And so if you're interested in working with a coach and would like to talk with me about what it would look like, you can go to consultmelisa.com and set up a time for schedule an exploratory call. Just so you know, I do have my consultation calendar. If you're listening to this in the real time, it is currently, I think, unavailable till the 5th or so of August. So you can check back then if you want a coach, a relationship that would be starting in September or so, or Q4, between September and Q4. Or if it's something that you want immediate support on, you can always email me and see if I've got some pockets of availability here and there. So you can always send me an email and see if there's anything open for you so we could talk about working together. All right. So good that you were here today. And I look forward to you having a second half plan that allows you to really design a powerful second half for your consulting business and finish the year strong. All right. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you again next week. Take care.
Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melisaliberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.